It's the Week 12 recap show. West Virginia falls to the Baylor Bears 49-35 at home on a Military Appreciation Night game at Milan Puskar Stadium. So, thanks for tuning in for tonight's video. Carson Fox here on Fox from West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. Sorry I didn't record and post this show yesterday because I thought it would be really a regurgitation of the same old, and I am really at this point in time in this season and this year unenthused to do so. I really created this channel first to share these videos with family and friends, second for my own cathartic therapy, as I've said, and third really to engage with you, Mountaineer Nation, the many fans, young and old, that I've passed by and decked out blue and gold gear as long as I've been walking into Milan Puskar Stadium for 20 some odd years now. And by the way of my declining video viewership numbers, even in wins recently against Arizona and Cincinnati, I feel like a lot of the messaging by me is the same. And I think there are a lot of fans who are simply just done with this season, have put it to bed, and simply just do not care anymore, which again is kind of defeating to record these videos. So I could get up on here and I could kind of walk through the nuances of this game, and really I could summarize it down into, a few points if that's really what you want to tune into tonight's show, because I want to talk about so much more. I feel like big picture in moving forward, because while I am very history buff, West Virginia football history buff, like to bring you the history on game by game versus opponent, and talk about different years and how one things in the past how have downstream effects into the future. I love to do that, but I want to talk about the future for this West Virginia football program, because I really do think that this was another checkpoint and the close on the chronological timeline that has been the trust the climb era, which has never manifested. And it felt like the closing of the chapter with this loss. And if you're tuning into this, I feel for you. If you're tuning in, you're probably the hardest of the hardcore Mountaineer fans wanting to listen to a Baylor game recap. You've invested, time, talents, and energy into this season, emotionally, physically, financially, and you're probably at your wits' end as with Neil Brown as the head coach of this program, because it's everything kind of emulating from him and what's permeating throughout the team, the individual players, performances. It just seemed like everything, the joy of beating Oklahoma State, which wasn't all that long ago, really, the beginning of October, and what felt like could be a potential turnaround to the season, is now just about gone. West Virginia had never lost to Baylor in Morgantown. This team is now 2-4 at home, one of the worst home records in program history for a single season. It can now not tie its record from 2023, when it appeared West Virginia, with all that it had coming back on the roster for this season, would finally have its conference championship contending team. The pipe dream that was getting to the Big 12 championship game can now finally be put to rest, meaning the best outcome for West Virginia from here on out is an 8-5 record with an Independence Bowl or guaranteed late bowl win, probably against Army or Minnesota or Rutgers. Ooh, boy, exciting. It will have failed to defeat a ranked opponent again. It will finish once again outside the top 25. I don't think I'm saying necessarily anything that any of you haven't already realized yourselves, and it just really sucks to be in this point. In the game on Saturday, I feel like it came down to a few certain things. Fourth down conversions, namely in the first half. There was a drop ball by Justin Robinson that would have allowed West Virginia, I think, either to take the lead or tie. I know West Virginia fought at the very end of the first half to cut it back to a 7-point deficit, then was mired and just slogging in the mud in the third quarter. Again, failed to convert on a couple of fourth down conversions in which it really needed in this game. and Baylor made a couple of just big plays at the right moments that they needed. And then when they went up 2 scores, and Garrett Green threw the interception that pretty much sealed the deal, it was just, again, rinse, repeat of what we can experience with this head coach, and the way that he manages a game, the way that he coaches a game, getting these players prepared to play a game, and then execution on Saturday. So I don't want to be like, perhaps I was a little bit critical, and maybe it felt like, it was directed at the players after that Cincinnati win a week ago. That really wasn't the case. And that's why I don't really want to put too much of the fault of the blame on these players, because there were some awesome standouts. I think Wyatt Milam continues to build together a resume that he can put in front of NFL draft experts, general managers, organizations, and he could be a first or second rounder. I think Nick Malone has been a complete unsung hero for this team all season long. And once again, having a PFF grade of 85, being one of the top 25 tackles in college football this year by their grading system. Like, wow, that's awesome to see. From a guy who in the offseason we didn't know whether it was going to be he was going to be a starter or Xavier Bosley might push his position and take it from him. No, he's been a really standout performer. Then on the defensive side of the ball, Ben Cutter, because Jeff Koons decides to go with a load management type of style for this game and doesn't start Josiah Trotter and waiting till the second quarter to unleash him. Ben Cutter puts together a nice first quarter performance, running all around, all over the field, collecting tackles, and then handed it off to his another guy who's been kind of like a spot starter here and there and been battling with injuries, Reed Carrico. 16 tackles in one game, the most in a performance since David Long in 2018. Like, there are a few individual performers that, like, okay, there were some shining moments. Even Garrett Green. It wasn't as accurate as humanly possible, but I mean, like, that's who Garrett is. But, he fought hard all game long. That's why I don't put that interception at the end of the game really much on him. He's trying to make a play. There's nothing there. Your team's desperate in a desperate situation. And, yeah, an ill-advised throw. But, I mean, okay, so you punt on the very next down? Like, what at the end of the day does it make much of a difference? But when West Virginia needed to make plays, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it just couldn't do so. And two things really, really irked me from this game before I move on, because, like, I'm just kind of tired of talking about so much of the negatives. I credited this defensive secondary prior to this contest in the preview, and then I think like last week against Cincinnati, maybe even to Arizona, that it had done such a good job on one-on-one tackling, really struggling in the coverage aspect of their defensive scheme, but whenever opponents would catch the ball, they'd get them down to the ground almost immediately. And checking with another West Virginia content creator out there, Justin Coos Walker of Coos' Corner, he has a Pro Football Focus account, was able to verify those stats with me on the advanced stats of what Pro Football Focus said is West Virginia's defensive secondary had done a very good job this year overall, collectively, of tackling and not giving up yards per reception after the catch. Whoa. Oh my gosh, this was the worst contest, I feel like, of the year in that regard. Oh my gosh, like, a guy who I'm like, where are you, Jacoby Spells, it seems like all season long. Now I know why, because, like, the kid unfortunately just let, I think it was Williams, Josh Cameron, number 34. Hold on, let me get it in my notes. Yeah, Josh Cameron just blow right by him. And that was something that the color commentator, Kirk Morrison, kept saying is, why doesn't West Virginia's defenders use the boundary as like a 12th man on the field and try and knock Baylor's wide receivers out of bounds if need be, if they're going to try and run all these different out routes or curl routes over to the sideline. Like, throw them out of bounds. Don't let them go to the inside and run wild on you. And that goes down to coaching. That's why Shadon Brown should have been fired the same day that Jordan Leslie was. That this secondary, like, I don't know how Jordan Leslie gets the pink slip, but Shadon Brown didn't. And now it just comes back to bite you. because once again, just abysmal performance by this West Virginia secondary, who I know continues to try and give it their all without Aubrey Burks, who's not playing. So it's just, it was hurtful. And then the other thing defensively is, I know this defensive line has done a decent job at points in time in this season creating pressure, getting after the quarterback, doing this and that. But still, and even in the rush defense, like the linebackers doing a really good job tackling, I feel like. And I already credited three linebackers in this video, but a 3-3-5 scheme, which is what West Virginia deploys. It's never been a 4-2-5 with this bandit position that is just like a giant rover. At the point of attack in the A gap, taking on the nose tackle against your center just leaves the A gap and the B gap susceptible for rushes up the middle. And when you're outmanned, and I've talked about this before, talked about it in the spring, and talking about a philosophical change that this West Virginia defense needed to, come up with. When you're already outmanned on the defensive line, when you're going against a three-man front, 5 versus 3, West Virginia got killed up the middle by Dawson Pendergrass and Bryson Washington in this game. I mean, once again, they earned their yards per carry average in this contest against West Virginia of 6+. That is, you're not going to win very many contests in the Big 12, or you're going to have to score points at will to keep up with them if you want to be able to win and compete in this conference, if you're going to give up that kind of rushing to your opponent. And that's what I quickly learned. It was like still first quarter, maybe into the second quarter, that this game was the kind of game that Neil Brown fears the most. A Dana Holgorsen esque 2018 West Virginia Oklahoma type of high scoring affair, or even go back so far as 2012 against this very Baylor program that oh gosh, when West Virginia scored on its first drive, it looked really good on its first drive, rushing, passing, you name it, which is always scripted by Neil Brown. Then, when they give up that touchdown to Washington trying to guard, or Trey Lathan trying to guard Washington, I was just like, oh dear, this is going to be one of those kind of days. And then when West Virginia didn't, I think they were either on their own 45 or the opposing 45. Either way, it's make a difference 10 yards. And West Virginia decided to punt after its second offensive possession, and then Baylor went back and scored. That's just when I was like, Neil Brown can't coach this kind of game. This is not the way that Neil Brown wants a football game ever to play out. So there's no way he's going to coach West Virginia to the ability that it's going to need to be able to score more points than Baylor when it's trying to play this kind of an offensive game. That's just goes contrary to Neil Brown's football belief. He would rather games be played, not 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but it's just defense first, and unfortunately West Virginia hasn't recruited that way to be able to lead with its defense for 6 seasons. I mean, 2012 was decent. Again, didn't play Oklahoma in that 2020 season when they were, I think, second in the country in scoring defense or something like that, and still got blown out by Iowa State. But that's just the problem. And this is what's dooming Neil Brown, I feel like, for this entire season, is not in this past offseason either going to another defensive coordinator, getting rid of Jordan Leslie and others to try and bolster this defensive staff with the players that they had. Also, the transfer portal additions that have not, unfortunately, hit. The development of high school players that were already in the system. And schematic philosophical changes that just sticking with the same old was going to work. And you know what they say, whenever you don't do anything different and repeat the same thing over and over, that's insanity. So that's a kind of, in 14 and a half minutes there, my summary of the Baylor game. There's no need really to go into that much more depth of position group by position group, offense, defense, special teams, because we just kind of know what we have. And if you watch this game and you're tuning into this video, I know that you watched that game on Saturday, and you probably have the same kind of thoughts and feelings that I have. So, I looked today, and I didn't listen to Neil Brown's press conference, read a couple of the articles afterwards. But here's what I'm going to say. I think that West Virginia will, I'm going to be bold here. And I think West Virginia makes a move come Sunday, win or lose. And I could be wrong. I guess there's no consequences for me being wrong. Because people have been speculating on this for a while now. But some developments have happened today coinciding with the timing. I don't want to sound too much of like a conspiracy theorist here, but I'm looking at the calendar and I'm seeing that we are 16 days away. Yes, just 16. You cannot believe that. From the high school early signing day. And 21 days away from the transfer portal December opening. That's 3 weeks. That's just over 2 weeks from the early signing day. For all, I think 23 of West Virginia's fall 25 commits can sign their commitment letter. Well, no, it's not National Letter of Intent anymore. It's weird. It's with NIL, I don't even know what they're calling it anymore. It's like a grant in aid or something to the school working out the NIL deal. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, I guess, for this video's purposes. But what I'll say is you can't go into those two events with Neil Brown's job status undecided or surrounded by this much controversy because of what this means for management of the roster. Now, I've heard some other content creators out there and some of their videos from, since Saturday's game ended. And, I think if you agree with me, Mountaineer Nation, that, nobody, I know I created an indispensable list going into the offseason last year. I don't think anybody's just indispensable at this point in time. What needs to change is the head coach. And win or lose, you can go on the road to Lubbock. Who cares? You're not playing for a conference championship game. Anybody can coach that game, whether it's Chad Scott or Matt Moore or heck, Shadon Brown, Blaine Stewart, whatever, Pat McAfee, to coach in West Virginia's final regular season game against Texas Tech on the road. And then if somehow West Virginia wins one of its next 2 games or both, and you play in some, again, mediocre bowl game. I mean, if Barry Alvarez, the athletic director at Wisconsin, I don't know if he still is, but back in the day, I think when either Paul Chryst was fired or there was a transition in coaching, and Barry Alvarez for one game could come out onto the sidelines and coach the team, bowl games, unfortunately, with the new 12-team college football playoff, mean even less. I hate that phrasing that the national media has parroted and everyone's bought into in 2024 than it has as ever before. So who cares if you're winning the Pop-Tarts Bowl or, unfortunately, the Duke's Mayo Bowl? As much as I love that whole experience and everything that went a part of that, it doesn't make any sort of a difference, I feel like, then, you're not winning anything it's super tangible. So, and if a new head coach comes in, you got to get a head start. We experienced this in 2019 whenever Dana Holger, or 2018 into 2019 when Dana Holgerson left for Houston. It was a quick turnaround that Neil Brown had to get hired from when Dana was left for Houston for Brown to recircle back with all of the fall 19 commits to get them to be able to sign, ink their commitments, stay with West Virginia. If you want to keep this high school recruiting class somewhat or completely intact, you got to get a new voice in there as soon as possible. If you want to try and get players to stay before that transfer portal opens up, and I'm sure there are some players on this team that are already being tampered with, Um, that you got to get somebody in there as soon as possible. If we're talking 5 days from now, West Virginia is going to take on UCF at home on Senior Day. You get through Senior Day, you go through those whole celebrations. These are all Neil Brown's players, so I feel like he's at least owed to that experience with his seniors, to go out like that. Even though if West Virginia doesn't even have 40,000 fans in the stands, or I guess it all depends kind of on the weather, and how much fun they want to have tailgating. So you're already talking like maybe 11 days, again, before these 11 days and then 16 days before these two important events happen. That, like, again, the Texas Tech game being inconsequential, a bowl game being inconsequential. Like, that's what we know how roster management means so much in today's world of college football, and you can do that through your recruiting efforts, transfer portal, transfer recruiting included. So to get a head coach in front of the current team, to get in front of the future players, got to get them in now. That's why, like, get past Saturday, and then you can be able to potentially move on. Now, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of, the internal debate, between fans, and like the cryptic message that Neil Brown sent via newsletter. It was a few weeks ago that like called out all these other sports success at West Virginia, but then talked about football and the challenges from a revenue perspective and all that jazz. Like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of like the balance back and forth between what it's going to cost $10 million plus the buyout, hiring a new head coach, and all of that jazz. But what I will say is, I'm sure that what is happening behind closed doors, and with a whole bunch of different boosters involved, since maybe as early as September 14th, when West Virginia lost to Pitt, or definitely whenever they lost to Iowa State, is that there are being conversations being had with boosters to figure out where they are at from a war chest perspective, and being able to potentially pay for Neil Brown's buyout, staff, how much that will affect one thing or another, in terms of next year's ticket sales, what's coming down the line with the House settlement, all of that jazz. And also trying to vet different candidates. I'm sure there are some shadow interviews being happening, wink, wink. But especially I feel like with two major candidates closely connected to the WVU football program, that they're weighing all of their different options. And I just think Saturday's game came to a head of a conclusion that these players just don't look, unfortunately, like, I mean, I don't want to say this as a negative, and this is, I think, something that is affecting college football at large to varying degrees, because of what the sterilization of professionalization in football is coming down to college football, that players are more concerned about the name on the back of the jersey than they are on the front of the jersey. What is all this, how are you paying me? How are you increasing my brand exposure? Do I have better options in the transfer portal? Like, I'm sick of it. I hate it. It makes me ill that's like so much of what we have to talk about with college football these days. But you do have to have a new head coach, in there, to come in there, I feel like guns blazing. Someone who is going to like do kind of, unfortunately, what Coach Prime had to do at Colorado, and like shed some of the dead weight on this team of players who you think are Division I, Power 4 caliber and prestige and talent, and go to the transfer portal where you can't get some of these high school, like, pretty much make it your team, which Sanders had to do. And I think like West Virginia is in a better place now than where Colorado was when he took it over at a 1-11 team. There are some pieces, but that's what I mean. I think there's going to have to be a culture change. I think there's going to have to be some players' butts held to fire, to like understand their commitment level to the West Virginia football program, how much there's the buy-in, and then can enough NIL resources come in, very quickly behind this head coach to be able to get, when we know there's already $1 million sitting in the bank from, or supposedly is, from Pat McAfee and staff. I think that's why you have to kind of hit a home run hire. And there's kind of two candidates that stick out to me. I'll blow the lid off it. I think the two candidates to me that stick out the most, because West Virginia could go the G5 route. They could go to an offensive coordinator route. Someone with previous head coaching experience, someone with ties to the program, and again, either can bring it to you in a combination of like motivation, high energy, coaching on the field, success, development, or recruiting. And two people I keep coming back to, I feel like, and I made a video about him last year when things were kind of up in the air about him. I do really think Jimbo Fisher, and on the other end is Anthony Becht. Anthony Becht being a Hall of Famer, or a WVU now Hall of Famer, has head coaching experience at the USFL level, young enough to say that like he's got previous coaching experience, has buy-in to West Virginia football, and like, I hate to say it, if that meant Nico Marchiol transferring for West Virginia to bring in Rocco Becht from Iowa State, like, I love Nico, but again, with like no player being indispensable at this point in time, would there be enough? Would he be able to come? Like, I think he would have to interview incredibly well with Ren Baker and prove it very soon, very quickly, that he that knows what goes with being a great coach, and then surround him with either other great coaches or a huge commitment from the boosters and the administration to go whole hog on recruiting, both from high school and transfer portal recruiting, and just kind of give him the keys to the car to go. The other one being Jimbo Fisher is obviously he knows what it takes to be successful. Just the article that I read in the aftermath of his firing from Texas A&M kind of scares me. That he wasn't able to have, successful outcomes with how much of an investment that Texas A&M put into NIL resources, and then the kind of culture that he created there, so toxic that the boosters at Texas A&M were willing to pony up $70 million. We're talking about like West Virginia is kicking and screaming and freaking out about a $10 million buyout on Neil Brown. Times that by 7, and that's what Texas A&M is paying Jimbo Fisher to go away. And why this potentially could even happen with these two different coaches, interesting today that University of Massachusetts, UMass for short, fired its head football coach. Now, again, there are 10 million reasons why Neil Brown would want to stay at West Virginia, but the way that I look at it is this. And I think when he made those comments about the fans and having fun at the tailgates and all that he's just unfortunately stuck in a rut. Maybe he reads the writing on the wall that it's just not working out here. And again, $10 million is a lot of money, $4 million. But again, billboards going up around Morgantown about being fired, and the social media uproar about that, and like, oh man, his kids are going to see this, and this and that and the other thing. Well, hey, I know that UMass is an independent program, so I don't think they're they're not part of a conference. They are FBS, but who knows? Could go down to FCS, or you would consider still a G5, G6 program. And that's what I think is perfect for Neil Brown. Is perfect. That just like at Troy, like it fit what the caliber of kind of coach that he is. That and he's got good, values. It seems like, from everything that he shows in the community and around campus, and the way he's acted and hasn't put himself in trouble, family man, all of that. But he's just not out for this kind of like cutthroat, do everything that it takes to win type of league that it is at the Division I Power 4 level. Like, and that's okay. Like it's not, it's made out for everybody. You have to be ruthless. You have to eat, sleep, breathe, do this. And so that's why, is the next head coach at West Virginia going to be so invested and dedicated and love? Like, you have to have a certain love for West Virginia to be able to go through all of the trials and tribulations that come, because West Virginia is not perfect. Again, it's dealing with all of these financial things that hamper and hold the program back. And it's not in a Power 2 conference. It's still the eastern outpost of a Western league that predominantly the fan base does not care for or care about in the same way that it cares about its eastern rivals in Pitt, Penn State, Maryland, Louisville, Virginia Tech. I could keep going on and on and on. So, like, some things need to change. I'm not trying to foreshadow another video that I want to make about West Virginia's place in the Big 12 Conference and where it's better suited. But that's what I think Ren Baker's even said, like, that takes a special person who understands West Virginia, having the right fit. And if he's as good of an athletic director as I think he is, and so many others around Mountaineer Nation is, he's not just sitting on his hands. He's been working in the background, trying to come up with the perfect fit. Because I get it, he's probably, if not the most, second or third most powerful person at West Virginia right now, with Gordon Gee set to retire in June. And then, he has this huge decision that then will impact 2025. I don't know how you sit on the next whole year in sticking with Neal Brown, because I'm just like, Neal Brown unfortunately has wasted, I feel like, my mid to late 20s and now into early 30s. The joy of going to Milan Puskar Stadium, the WVU football game day experience, is just unfortunately soured because, again, the comments were just the manifestation of a lot of things I feel like Mountaineer fans were internalizing when Neal Brown said that about, like, did they have fun? Is at the end of the day that we don't have much confidence, if any, in the visor-wearing head football coach on the sideline, in his ability to coach the players up, to play at their best potential, coach the game to win rather than lose, call good plays in an order in which they're able to succeed offensively and defensively, like just everything that goes within coaching, decisions that are made, and then development in the offseason to go out there and look competent against a Penn State, to beat Pitt, to beat Maryland, I know thankfully he beat Virginia Tech, but to beat a ranked opponent more than just 3 out of 20 times. And this was the best roster that he was supposed to have in here, and this looks like 2022 all over again. Like I said, coming into the year, I thought their floor was at least 5-7. Thankfully, they'll at least get to 5-7, but that is a worst case scenario, and West Virginia's going to hit it. So I don't know how you can't move on. Again, I know this isn't life or death, but this is big business. This is an outcomes-based business, and you're playing with people's joy and happiness that they're willing to attach financial dollars to. That when you suck the life out of so many people that I've seen on social media, commenting about how it's not fun going to the blue lot, driving home, and all what fans pay, sometimes upwards of 3 times or more in market value for tickets. Like 2024 has been an odd year for me because of the birth of my little girl at the end of August. But I feel so much for the people who have invested a season ticket package or a 3-game mini game package or RV. I talked about this in the off season in my series about the WU football game day experience. I can only imagine what people who pay for a blue lot pass for this whole season, a season ticket package of at least 2 or more tickets, and then what you pay for food and beverages and merchandise and this, that, and the other thing. And you can't not go to the brawl if in Pittsburgh if you're gonna be that committed of a fan. Like, I just feel so bad for those folks because of how little of a return and joy that they're getting. It's almost just feels like an obligation or a dread, and you just got to sell those tickets. That's why I'm always so hesitant to invest into season tickets, because of the volatility of the ticket prices because of how the team succeeds or doesn't succeed. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I could go off on a tangent, but like, if that's the way I feel, and I talked about this in my series about how, with the apathy toward Neil Brown, the apathy toward the Big 12, everybody, there are so many commenters on that series who just said, I'd rather just sit in front of my television and experience it that way because of how good TV is now. I got my own food and drink. I got my lazy boy chair, or however you watch the game. Like, it's more comfortable than sitting on metal bleachers in 40-degree weather and rain. Or, I know we've had good weather this season, but you know what I'm saying in this case. And then, like, again, the financial investment that it takes to put into this. So that's what you have to continue to replicate. Ren Baker wants Milan Puskar Stadium to look like this again. This is optimal. What we were seeing in the late third or fourth quarter, or however when it was, when most fans at this past Saturday filed out and the whole upper deck was pretty much empty, like, that's unacceptable. Like, that is what you see at some of the worst Purdue, or prior to their success, Kansas, or some of the teams in the ACC, or previously Pac-12. Like, you can't have that. It is a dog-eat-dog world, and right now West Virginia is wearing milk-bone underwear. And you gotta be able to put the attendance figures up and compare that, and the TV exposure, and it just gets worse. It can spiral, it can swirl, and thank God that West Virginia fans are some of the most dedicated, loyal fans in all of sports, to still love their team, love their program, and support the way they have. That I don't think that this is like a so far gone conclusion that West Virginia is going to be like, dropping down potentially to the G5 or G6, or just become potentially irrelevant, because I still think this is attractive enough to the right fit head coach out there. There would be tons of interest I feel like, into this position if it can be reciprocated with the financial commitment by West Virginia and its boosters, be able to put in. And I'm telling you, just like, look at Colorado. I watched that game prior to West Virginia's kickoff on Saturday against Utah. Stands were packed. That's impacting enrollment. I don't have the figures for you. I didn't do that research coming in, but that's got to impact enrollment. That the football program is the doorstep to the university, that the more excitement and the more winning, that's what people want to do. They want to be a part of a winning culture. They want to be a part of fun. That's what 16, 17-year-old kids, when they see students either on social media or watching TV, and like how much fun they have at these football games and the whole Saturday environment in Morgantown, like, that's what they want to be a part of. That's what they want to do. So to just provide those types of disappointing Saturdays, it gets old, and it's been old for so much of the last 6 years. The worst collective 6-year stretch since the Kennedy administration. So you got to make a move. perhaps Neil Brown goes to UMass. Maybe like they have a handshake agreement between UMass that say there's no buyout. Go ahead, take him. Go to Massachusetts, his alma mater for football. He can be able to recreate himself, his football identity, or maybe he just gets settled. Maybe up there in Massachusetts, and if they can they'll stick by him, they'll support him, they'll commit. I think like that would be a good fit for UMass. I think it's a win-win. And if West Virginia could get out of this financial hole of having to pay $10 million, or if somehow that UMass was able to eat some of the buyout, I don't know. But it's just, I think it's coming. I think it's coming on Sunday after the UCF game, that I think that things have just run their course with Neil Brown in West Virginia. I think also from his side that he's in his eyes done everything he could, and the I guess angst and frustration and everything that's wearing on him and his family and just everything of college football, that like there is an out. There might be an out here. That it doesn't have to end in him being fired and it just be ugly and all that then he could just escort and go to UMass, and then West Virginia can move on. It doesn't have to end ugly like that. It can work out, I guess, for both parties in that kinds of way. I think that's the worst case scenario, and you have to go through this kind of ugly divorce, and there's this dark cloud hovering over West Virginia University even longer because it's paying this buyout and trying to figure out all of these different financial things that are coming down the pike with the house settlement and NIL and all of that jazz. And then who do you find? So if that's your handshake agreement with UMass and Neil Brown could exit stage left, could you go for potentially a bigger name, quote unquote? Or do you feel okay with those two names that I threw? You got to choose one. You got to ultimately just choose one. So do you continue to go through an interview and vet more candidates? Who's on Ren Baker's Rolodex to potentially contact? And could it come as soon as this weekend, or if it comes after the Texas Tech game and it's just kind of a wait and see mode with the transfer portal and this high school early signing day, and that's kind of secondary. Like they'll get the players when they get the players. If they're committed to WVU, the institution and the program, doesn't matter necessarily when they sign. Like, I don't know. I'm throwing out a whole bunch of different scenarios for you, but it just seemed like that this Baylor game was the close of an era. How do you feel about it? Love to know your comments on everything that I've had to say. Whether you agree with me, disagree with me, is you just tired, unfortunately, of hearing the negativity and you don't want to talk about that, or watch any of these games because you feel like you already know the result, or they just don't bring you any joy even when they win. But I appreciate your feedback. If you like this video, please like it so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. And again, I feel like if you're tuning into this video, you're already a super hardcore fan, so I appreciate you, and you probably are a subscriber. But if not, hit that subscribe button. I'll be back later this week. Maybe either talk about another subject, or we will still preview the UCF game come Saturday. So Golden Knights, Mountaineers, we'll talk about it. Thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.